Good morning, everybody. Welcome, Priyadarshini. Welcome to the Yogi Club.
Thank you very much.
I've been looking towards this shoot for almost, I think, 4 weeks now. I've been trying to get a journalist on this, for a while, but apparently no one has showed up. But thank you so much for coming over.
Thank you very much.
All right, so it's been a busy schedule for you, I understand, and you've been traveling all across US, Morocco. You will be going next. Covered most of India.
I've come
Rural India, I would say, in terms of
across India actually.
across
A lot of rural India, but also a lot of urban India as well. So
wonderful, wonderful. And okay, starting off, पहले ये बताओ कि journalism as a whole entity. I mean, how did it start for you? How did you become a journalist? How did this zeal come inside?
I was always driven towards journalism. I always thought myself to be a journalist much before I actually became a journalist. I believe that journalism is it runs in your blood, and there is a song that plays in your head which tells you that you have to go in that direction.
There has been some support from your family side as well.
Not necessarily, because we don't have too many journalists in our family.
Okay.
And journalism itself it's not an easy profession to be in for a woman, and you have very odd hours, and especially if you're at the news desk, you have to work till very late in the night, come back late. So it's never very, very acceptable in many families. But my family, fortunately, we come from a very broad-minded family. So my parents have been very supportive of my move. And the transition was almost very organic and natural, and I knew that I had to go in that direction.
Now, being a woman, how the odd situations are much worse, I would say. In areas where there are a lot of slum-based areas, or there are areas that you have to cover which might be conflict affected.
Yes.
in some way or the other, and that's a totally different angle for a woman to say that. So how are you gritting about it? How are you pushing forward to it? I mean, there's a lot of support from your family and colleagues as well, but what is your personal challenge in this angle?
I think I've always been driven in the direction where I'm impacting, bringing about change on the ground. And I believe that the impactful journalism is one where you're actually changing somebody's life, or you're changing a community's basic existence and the way they live their life. Is it audible?
It's better now. It's better.
Okay, great. So for me, I think working in conflict zones and difficult subjects have always been my passion, because I believe that I'm not very driven in terms of page 3 journalism and superficial subjects. I'm not saying that lifestyle is superficial. I mean, there is also very strong, impactful journalism that you can do there. But for me, I think
That's not your cup of tea.
It's not my
area of interest.
It's not my core area. I would do that as well, and I've done stories in those areas as well. It's not that I close my mind to any subject. I think as a journalist, it's your role to be as versatile with your craft as possible without closing doors. So I do that always. But for me, the core area is really human rights, religion, and social justice.
Okay, so that must bring you face to face with a lot of gangs, who've been trying to change the society with a certain aspect in their mind, or certain groups of people who might have a certain orientation that might not really align to your understanding.
Yeah, I mean, when you are working in conflict zones and you're working in difficult areas, it's not easy. I mean, you will be encountering different kinds of people, and people who are not very happy with you doing the work that you're doing. So it's not gangs necessarily, but I would say opposition groups. Which,
gangs, I mean, collection of people.
Yes, of course. Opposition groups which may want to browbeat you into submission or not want you to do the craft that you believe that you've set out to do. But that has never really stopped me from, I think,
Pushing ahead.
absolutely, because for me that is absolutely critical for me to move on with my passion.
So you're a freelance journalist, so I want to understand, how do you go about being a freelance journalist? I mean, you have to associate yourself initially with a media house and maybe build yourself up to a certain level of experience or with the connection you might have in your industry and then become a freelance journalist. Does it work that way, or is there some route where you...
There isn't any route as such. I mean, you can go any route. I mean, you can take any route that you wish to take. I can talk about my personal experience. For me, it was, when you're starting off as a journalist, personally, I believe it always helps if you are affiliated to any media house that has a significant presence in
Excuse
India.
me, Pal, could you adjust the mic a little? यहाँ पे. I think we need to थोड़ा सा ऊपर होते हैं. The vocals are not in clearly. और थोड़ा सा बस it should be. Alright. Coming back to your story.
Yeah. So for me, I think for a journalist, in my understanding, is it helps if you are affiliated when you're starting out in your career, that you're affiliated to any
Media house.
some media house that has a substantial presence. That way you already have a foot in the door, and that helps you to leverage and build those connections in the media world, and some people just continue to be affiliated to a media house. But for me, I think the path was different, because after a point in my career, I have over a decade's worth of experience as a journalist, and after a decade, I thought that it would make sense, given my experience and my global travels and also my India travels, that I leverage this experience and that I do what I believe in doing, and that I don't cater to any organization or any person, but continue to do the work that I want to do over and above anything else.
Is it the way the things are orienting right now that are pushed towards freelance journalism? The way media houses are aligning themselves to certain ethnicity or certain political party, or that way, has that been something affecting you to take the decision? There has been of something.
Yes, there has been a lot of censorship in India in terms of how the media is functioning currently, and it's not easy to be a journalist given the political climate in the country. But for me, I think even more than that, I believe that I want to really expand my forte as a global journalist. I don't want to limit myself to being an India journalist, India-based journalist.
Are you tired of being an Indian journalist and trying to improve things in India, and then rather look at it as a whole picture? Have you have you made peace with that? That things are going to change with a very slow pace. So rather, should I expand my vision and just put an equal amount of efforts in other areas as well? Because no matter how much you work, it's again going to go with a similar kind of pace.
I don't think so, because I think things are very bad in other parts of the world as well. It's not any different in any country in this world as of now. So I don't think that I'm cynical about India. I don't think so. I think there's great journalism to be done here, as there is great journalism to be done anywhere in this world. Because as a journalist, I believe it does not matter where I do my journalism, as long as I do my journalism.
Now, the censorship in media, I know that has really depleted our position on a global platform level on the independence of media, and we have, I think, dropped down a few rankings looking at that. But again, the way things seem to be improving, though in a superficial way, I'm not sure, or to the very core, that is a possibility again. But journalism has a very critical role to play in that. And again, nowadays things are aligning up in a certain left or right. There's no middle way. So, have you tried to look out for a middle way? Is there somewhere we can find a middle way towards the left and right wing parties?
I mean, when you are training to be a journalist, you're always told that you have to be objective in your writing and your thinking and the way you present the news. And things have changed a lot in the world of journalism across the board, across the world.
Okay.
So it's very difficult to, and when you are a journalist, you are reading a lot, you're thinking a lot, you're talking to different people, and you become more ideologically driven and motivated. So you're bound to have certain sympathies, bound to be more sympathetic to a certain political idea and political narrative, but at the same time you have to kind of continue to tell yourself that you have to give both sides of the argument.
Decent chance to.
Yeah, but where you need to be critical, you need to be critical, and you should not stop yourself from being critical, even if it means things not going your way, and there are journalists who've lost their jobs, and
somebody recently
they've
lost their
had
lives.
threats that have been absolutely imposed, and people have threatened them, and even with threatening them to not stop doing what they do because they would risk their life in doing what they're doing. But journalists are risk takers. They are meant to be risk takers, and you have to take into account that you got into the profession not for the money, but for the passion.
Definitely. Now, just a very interesting question popped up in my mind. Now, recently we have held elections in Bengal, and you are pretty much you basically are coming from that region, I believe.
Yes, I'm from Calcutta, but I've been living in Delhi for quite a few years now.
All right, fair enough. So you might have had a close watch on those. Have you followed it closely?
Across India, I've been closely following the elections.
But the recent ones have been particularly aggressive, and then people have been looking towards that area in a very if totally focused towards that region specifically. How do we win that place? Because it has been a fort for a while now to a certain allegiance, and people are right now changing it as we talk about it. So, I mean, how does the situation sound to you over there? How do you capsule it? If somebody has to understand it at the moment.
The political situation in Bengal is very vitiated. Politically, the left has kind of been completely depleted, and it's depleted in Bengal, its presence. And there is a resurgence of the right, and Trinamool Congress, which has had a significant presence so far, has got a beating. The BJP is making more inroads into Bengal. So, and there's also a lot of communal tension. It's growing a lot.
I have seen, major part of my life, I've seen community tension in Assam as well. I used to live just a place nearby, and I've seen so much of a political drama, so many riots, that are called out every other day. So that is eventually affecting the economy. So how do you take it out of a political war zone to a economic zone? That way. How do you take out of that? It has been a war front for a lot of.
It's because of the political violence, and the whole narrative is changing everywhere across India. It's very difficult to move from the political to the economic. No, that's not. Those are two different domains.
Interests of people towards the welfare. How do they realize if they are voting for just right-wing parties? So how do they make sense of it if they have to choose one of them?
Yeah, I mean the narrative, the reason why
there's no
the
option
BJP
for a left-wing party.
The left has been completely almost zero presence.
Yeah.
It's got nothing this time in the elections. And those who were sympathetic to the left have very radically moved to the right. So they must be believing in something that the BJP is selling to them, the narrative of development and um, employment opportunities.
Are you not buying that?
No, I don't.
Okay. All right. Now, you have initially started out, I think, with social issues. You have covered up a lot of heartbreaking stories. One of the most affecting one was the one in Sonapur, I think. Sonbhadra, nearby Varanasi. It was, I would request all the viewers and listeners to switch on to a channel, Priyadarshini Sen, Weebly.in. And this article about a village nearby Varanasi, 70 kilometers down south, where because of the industrial effluents and fluorides and mercury that has been flowing in, it almost looks like a wrong turn shoot has gone down over there. It almost looks like as if somebody is shooting that movie and you might have gone to a wrong place, because the situation is so heartbreaking, so saddening that children have infected teeth, malnutrition bodies, the limbs are just not placed right. It's just weird to see that. I mean, how do you experience, what was the experience?
It was heartbreaking because, I didn't even know how it would play out. I mean, I didn't even know where the story was going, because I knew that there were cases of severe problems actually. So around mercury poisoning and a lot of pollution in the environment. So I knew I'm going into an area which would expose me to a lot of heartbreaking stories, but I didn't know to what extent. But when I went there, village after village was swept almost by an epidemic of complete dehumanization of life.
Those are wrapped up bodies over there. That's so weird. Seeing the ladies, they are bent from their mid up, and they are almost crouching. Most of them I see, have been crouching and leaning onto sticks to move. And then the situation is just horrible over there. So, did you conducted a survey and you took did some testing over there, and it turned out that was the problem. That mercury fluorides were the problem, but eventually half of them who were involved in those emissions were denying it. Half of them accepted it. So in the end, how did it play out for you?
So we kind of got, just to scientifically prove that mercury is the reason behind this crisis in Sonbhadra. We wanted to get samples from the area, so soil, fish, water, plants. We wanted to test them in a proper laboratory back in Delhi to kind of reinforce the fact that this is not hogwash. This has proper basis, that mercury is a problem there. So the tests proved that. And when we were interviewing the people, because they were all very scared, because they didn't. One is the social stigma, when you have mangled limbs and you can't think clearly, you can't see clearly, you can't speak clearly, and your family is covering up for you. And families those who were not affected by it were covering up for their other members who were affected by this mercury poisoning.
You've seen that movie, right? Wrong Turn. Have you seen that movie?
No, I have not.
You should. I mean, you can see a lot of visuals that might relate you to that. Because that movie eventually portrays, emission of these chemicals, and once they get inside you for a period of time, how that changes you from inside outside. That is so horrible, and that is a very similar scene. It just flashed into my mind because I had seen that movie a few times.
I'll check it out.
It's just horrible. Any other heartbreaking places that you might have been to that could be a better or worse than this?
Yeah, I mean, this was a severe case. I mean, where how closely the environment is tied to technological industrial innovation and progress that people are constantly talking about. But the other side of industrial progress.
Any other, most challenging and any interesting story that you can think of in one of yours?
Yeah, I
trips?
was I did this story about Varanasi recently, and where um, Prime Minister Modi is constructing this corridor to link the Vishwanath temple to the banks of the Ganges, the Ghats. And how the whole land is ravaged actually, the whole area, the stretch of land from the Lalita Ghat right up to the temple. Centuries old temples and structures and monks and monasteries have been torn down to make way for this corridor. So it was heartbreaking to see how this has led to complete decimation of centuries old tradition and culture. Now people have been cast out and thrown out of their basic livelihoods, and shopkeepers have lost their shops. Though, the other side of the argument is that these were illegal encroachments and that they should have been removed long back. But it's not a question of just illegal encroachment.
It's complicated. It's very
complicated.
Very complicated. Yes. They've been living there for such a long time that they consider it their own property, but eventually it is not their property. So now, how do you take them out of that
and the thing
place?
is, it's not just a question of removing people. It's also a question of
compensating for if you're providing taking them off a place to live. I mean, some kind of compensation.
It's not also about compensation. I mean, that is also a matter of debate, because compensation hasn't been given to the extent people thought they would get, and promises that were made. But also a question of a culture. Varanasi was known for pilgrimage on foot. It was not meant for rich people coming in with their sedans and SUVs and parking their cars and just doing their prayers and moving from one spot to the other. It is a tradition. It's a question of, because a pilgrimage on foot ensures equality. There's no question of rich and poor. Everyone does it. So if you are driven by faith, you do it, whether you're rich or poor.
I don't know how much of a pilgrimage on foot concept exists nowadays. I mean, I highly doubt it.
The idea of a pilgrimage has changed, because it's no longer going through those serpentine lanes and closely built houses, closely aligned temples which have been existing for centuries. It's really a question of point to point, from the temple to the ghats.
This point has come a bit eventually in the northern area. This point came much earlier in the south. This concept of monetizing pilgrimage, and it's been a concept long back that has existed in the south, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it has been happening even at the Tirupati temple and some other places. But Banaras is like the heart, the spiritual center of India. So when it hits Banaras, then it hits the rest of the world. The world gets to know about it. I mean, if it happens to any temple in India, of course, if it's an ancient temple and it's a well-known temple, it kind of word gets out and it becomes a concern.
How do you preserve the world's oldest city? That's the basic thing. How do you preserve it?
Yes, that's the role of the government.
Do you get it to at the same level the rest of the nation is progressing? Do you keep it intact? How do you suppose that should
You need to keep tradition intact. I mean, India is the spiritual center of the world, the Eastern world. People come to India just for this. People come to India to see what the West lacks. The West does not have this core spirituality that India does, which is why people from the West travel to India to see this. So if you destroy this and you try and ape the West and you try and become the West, then the West doesn't need to come here. Westerners don't need to come here. If they get flashy malls and high-end cars and all that, they have ample and much more.
They want to have a tough time over here.
Not a tough time, but a time that connects more with the soul, and it's a more emotional connection.
Yeah. I'll buy that. Tough times gives you a better insight.
Absolutely, endurance.
And endurance, definitely. That's okay. Now you're heading out to Morocco, just next from here.
Yes, but I'd like to keep that.
Okay, for the next project.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll talk more about the next time. All right. What all is in your itinerary? What all places would you be traveling?
I'll be traveling quite a bit. I mean, I have I have Kashmir lined up. I have Bangalore lined up. I have some other center across India. I have a few places to visit in the next couple of months, and I have some global travel also coming up later this year.
Okay. Now, since this Kashmir topic has arrived, so I have to ask you a question. I won't debate you in either of the ways, whatever it is over there, but I want to understand the core that you have understood while living over there. How long have you lived there?
I haven't lived in Kashmir.
I mean,
I've
traveled and
kind of
understood it,
traveled,
yeah.
and lots of time I've been there.
Multiple
yes,
times.
quite a
So,
few times.
what has been your understanding in all those visits, and how do you encapsulate the situation that you have seen from your own eyes?
Kashmir is very close to my heart. I love Kashmiris. I think they're the nicest people in this world. And it's heartbreaking. What Kashmir is going through is heartbreaking because it's really, it's caught between India and Pakistan's politics, murky politics, and mass human rights violations that have happened over decades. And people are just pawn in the hands of political, crossfire between the two countries. So, and I've seen that from close quarters. And I've had multiple interviews with people. I've been to different places across Kashmir, and I've documented the abuses that are happening there. So, yeah, Kashmir is really in a very volatile state, and things are not getting any better.
Not getting any better. So, are you more towards in terms of tightening things over there, or do you want to loosen them out? How do you want to see
Kashmir
them?
should be given its respect. Kashmir should be given its
Due.
due. Absolutely, it has its identity, its own identity, and that identity should come through.
The identity has been put in way too much of focus. I mean, if we talk about identity, I mean, its identity has been in the top of news lines for a while now. So it certainly has an identity, but
How many positive stories do you see coming out of Kashmir?
that's the thing. That is the thing. We do see positive stories, but a lot of them are again lined up as per the interest of media houses. So we can't really say what's really ongoing. But your support lies towards the general people.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes.
Not towards the people who might be there in terms of defense. Are they not really doing the defensive work? Is it more of an offensive work?
No, it's my heart lies with the people of Kashmir, and I believe Kashmir should get the respect that it deserves, and Kashmir should not be brutalized the way it has been brutalized. So, yes.
What aspect of brutalization are we talking about? Could you just throw some light on that so that our
Yeah, I mean
better understand?
on a day-to-day basis, the rapes that have happened in Kashmir, which have been undocumented, the mass graves that have been discovered in Kashmir, undocumented. Then the other human rights violations, such as indiscriminate killings and enforced disappearances in Kashmir, and what else? I mean, rapes that have become on a mass scale in Kashmir.
It's so different, talking about this sitting in a studio and with the situation that you face over there, it's much tense. How did you feel? What was the frenzy flowing through you, when you were moving across the land over there?
I moved through Kashmir with a very open mind. I didn't go with any close mind because that's not your role as a journalist. You have to have an open mind. So I was taking in whatever I saw and without being judgmental.
And how do people talk about the ongoing system or progress that is ongoing so far in India? How do people see that? I mean, is this really affecting them, or are they, separate from it? Are they far away from it? How is it like for people?
In what sense? I don't get it.
In the sense of, the way we see country as a war zone between politics and propaganda. Basically, we see a lot of propaganda, and it's a hard time for us to decide who's right, who's not. But how is it like for people over there? They don't have agendas like that. Their agenda is survival.
In Kashmir?
Yeah.
Yes, survival,
Yeah.
respect.
So, is the current ongoing changes in all across the country? How is it affecting people over there? the changes that are.
Yeah, people are not feeling any better about the political changes in India because Section 377, which is right now, it might be withdrawn in Kashmir, and we don't know. I mean, how it is going to affect people's.
377 provides special status to people in Kashmir. Is that what it is?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And
So,
that would be taken away. So 70 years that section has existed. Why hasn't things changed and improved?
because that's what Kashmir is a pawn in the hands of India and Pakistan.
Okay.
So, Kashmir has never really had an independent entity of its own because India wants a slice of Kashmir as much as Pakistan wants its own slice of Kashmir. So they claim Kashmir, but Kashmir doesn't need to be claimed. Kashmir is its own
State.
It's its own state. It has its own independent existence.
Do you want to make it separate as a?
No, I mean I don't care. I mean it's a political question here.
Make it like a Switzerland-based concept, a neutral party in between.
I don't know. I mean, how the political ramifications will be, and if Kashmir, I mean, they should come to a consensus and decide how to stop what's happening in Kashmir, and that's the larger question than who should Kashmir belong to or how it should exist. I think. Because of all that has happened over decades, Kashmiris are tired. They need a voice. They need an end to all that is happening in Kashmir, and that end can happen in its own through a formation of its own entity, or it could mean coming to a consensus. India and Pakistan coming to a consensus and deciding how to stop what's happening in Kashmir.
I don't know if I could see that happening anytime soon, but I sure hope so. It does.
Yeah.
All right, so you have traveled all across India. You would be traveling most of beautiful places all across the world. And so, what are you looking towards? How are you trying to make a trajectory of your career?
That's what I told you. I want to expand my skills and I want to grow as a global journalist.
What kind of journalist? Is it like a writer or somebody?
Yeah, writer.
Okay.
So, though I've I want to combine it with multimedia skills, like I've done video, I've done documentary, I've done a little bit of audio as well, and photography. So I do combine these other skills along with my writing, but writing is my core focus, and I wanted to remain that way.
Now the way things are moving ahead in journalism, they are getting complicated again, and we cannot understand which side is right, which side is wrong. So, do you have any recommendations that we can follow a certain channel, a certain media outlet that would give us a better picture, or maybe a neutral picture?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of independent outlets which are not affiliated to any established in that sense media house are doing pretty well, and I would definitely recommend Wire. I would recommend Scroll. I would in India I'm talking about. I would NDTV definitely is there, and I mean, which at least doesn't totally stilt and totally
support the.
Doesn't kind of blindly lead you in a direction that that gives you a completely different picture of what news should be.
Okay, I'll definitely keep that in mind while checking out the media outlets and getting my feed over there. Okay, and apart from that, a few topics I had in mind right now, I'll have to land them accordingly. Now, how much time do we have if we are not too late about it? Almost 10 to 15 minutes. Okay, now, recently you visited US, you went there with some independent work, and did you cover any aspects of social work over there, or what did you cover?
No, it's I've got this, I've been awarded, I'm part of this project called the Spiritual Exemplars Project.
Okay.
And it's basically given by the University of Southern California and funded by the Templeton Foundation in the US. and they are looking to profile and document the lives of 100 spiritual exemplars, or basically outstanding individuals who've done path-breaking work in the field of religion and spirituality and social good and development. So they've got on board and they've selected 20 to 25 journalists across the world to do this. So they've selected me. And,
Oh, wonderful. I mean,
yeah.
is that how it happened? So, which piece was that, which sparked that?
It wasn't a piece, it was
The
my
entire
own
work.
application actually.
Okay.
And yeah, so.
So, you're into spirituality as well, you're getting in there, or are you already into that zone?
I mean, now I do, most of my work is now religion reporting, so that's closely tied to the project.
Okay, and how do you closely identify religion and spirituality?
I mean, sometimes the lines can get blurred, sometimes they're very distinct entities. Spirituality is, you could be spiritual and not religious, and you could believe in a greater good or a greater power, something that drives the world, something that drives you every morning to wake up and do your whatever.
So, are you into that concept of consciousness, awareness?
Yes, I believe that there should be a core element of spirituality in your life, at least a conscious living rather, so that you are aware of yourself and your surroundings, and that you're not just kind of going with the flow, that you introspect and that you think about life and you think about the possibilities around existence, and so yeah, that's spirituality. But religion would mean you are ascribing to a particular faith, and it could be very divisive or it could also be very uniting. So it depends on how it is used, and but often it has been more often than not it has been misused to break people and to destroy communities and on the grounds of religion. But it can also be, I don't want to be cynical about it, it can also be it can be a very powerful force to unite communities and groups of people. And for instance, you have now Eid, where there are a lot of women who are now organizing festivities and bringing, so the lines of gender discrimination is kind of going down and in these areas and in these groups of people. So women are kind of leading the way. So where you're actually bringing in people from different communities, not just from the Muslim community. So it can be very uniting. But
everybody loves biryani.
Absolutely, everyone loves biryani.
So that's the most uniting thing you can find, in a way. But that's very heartwarming that at least we can decide on a platter that we all can work out.
Absolutely, yes.
That's one thing. India has always been very closely associated with fooding habits, so I think that can play a very critical role. What do you say? I mean, fooding habits and uniting people through food, that's the way mothers have channeled their love for so long. So that's one way we can maybe make it an even ground to
yes, food can really bring people together.
Yeah,
and food, especially served during festivals, can really pull people together and make them come on a common platform.
Definitely, we should have monthly gatherings, funded by the state, basically, where people of different ethnicities can suddenly hang out. All right, wonderful. Okay, we are just about to wrap up, and won't take much of your time. Thank you so much for coming, and I would love to have you on board again sometime soon if you'll be give us the opportunity.
Certainly, yeah.
All right, done about that. All right, thank you guys. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you Hardik and Payal for being a part of the show, and thank you Priyadarshini again for coming over. It was a pleasure. All right, we're taking off. Okay. Kal raat ke rang sutri still showing on the face.